It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like, how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm here with my kingly co-host, Brett.
Yes, it's good to be king, Alice. So good to be king.
Unfortunately, you're not the king I'm referring to. As much as you sit atop your throne of lies, Brett, I am so excited to have one of our favorite podcasters, journalists, authors on, Gilbert King. Gilbert, thank you so much for being here with us yet again.
Oh, it's so great to be back and talking to you guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, Gilbert,
Gilbert.
you're one of the most you're one of the most prolific people I know. First of all, if you guys have not listened to Bone Valley Season 1 about the Leo Schofield case, you have got to go over there and listen to it. We covered the case after Gilbert covered it incredibly on his podcast. And now, if we could not get enough with Season 1, he is coming out with Season 2 very, very soon on April 9th. Gilbert, congratulations on Season 2. It's not always that, these types of podcasts get a second season.
Oh, yeah, it's not. And believe me, there was a lot of hesitation. We couldn't really figure out what we were doing. We had roots of a story, and then it all sort of came together in this kind of miraculous way. And I don't know how or why, but it just really happened.
I have a question about that. Bone Valley's become iconic. I would say it's one of the great true crime podcasts, right up there with, Serial and, S-Town and all that stuff. Not to put a lot of pressure on you, but do you feel the pressure? Do you feel the pressure for Season 2 to deliver the same kind of, engaging storytelling like you did with Season 1?
There's a little bit of pressure. Like, I didn't feel a lot of pressure. Like, I wasn't going to go forward with something just for the sake of going forward with something or finding a new case that just didn't have the same kind of a heart and emotion that the first season had. I thought there was something really special about the second season, but I wasn't really quite sure how it would develop. And so there was moments where we were thinking, I don't know if we have it. It's just, I don't know if this fits as a season. And I just said, let's just stay patient with it and just keep going with it. And, I take a lot of time with these things. And eventually it just really came together. And I said, this is it. Now it works. And I had a great team around me that were helping really massage it and work it through. We had a lot of, meetings about where the story could go and how to develop it. It's just the benefit of working with a great, great team. And I really had that both seasons.
Well, kind of with that, Season 1 covered Leo Schofield and what ultimately you determined to be a wrongful conviction. And it had an incredible story arc that I know you didn't set out to discover. You were instrumental in the real story arc of Leo's story. But in a lot of ways, it did arc. and it ended, it could have ended there. So what did you have in mind for season 2, and what has it turned into? Give us a little bit of a teaser if you can.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. What's really interesting is it kind of began in the aftermath of Bone Valley and the reaction to it. And people started coming out of the woodwork and contacting me. Aside from that, I did stay in touch with Jeremy Scott after we interviewed him, which was 2021. He said, "You're my only friend." And he just kept writing me these letters. I'm like, well, I'm going to write them back. What am I? I went into it thinking, oh, this is kind of a monster. I don't know really how close I want to get to this guy. I kind of believe the things that he did. And then he just started writing me these letters, and it developed, every month I'd get a letter. I'd write him back. He would tell me he's starting to read more books, and I'd send him some books, and he's telling me he's reading these Westerns. I said, "Hey, I'd give you some books my kids read, like Game of Thrones and like Hunger Games." He would write, "I loved Hunger Games. That was so," and I'm like, all right, I can send this guy books. And I saw him just sort of becoming more honest about things. And he said, "How are people reacting to your podcast? And like, do they think I'm just evil for the things I said I did?" And he was asking a lot of questions like that. And then one morning in the fall of 2022, I get a voice message in the middle of the night, and it's from Jeremy Scott's kid, the kid he's never known. He had a kid, and this kid, not a kid anymore, he's 35, but he started saying, "I just always grew up not wanting to know. I just knew my father was a killer, and that I never knew anything, what was true, what was false. And then I listened to your podcast, and I was expecting this cold monster killer, and I heard this like really humbled, broken person admitting to the things he'd done and being tortured by it." And he just said that was the first time I ever thought, like, I just want to write him a letter and communicate with him. I've never even known him. And so we sort of started at that point. And I went down and met Justin. I met his family. He's just like the sweetest guy and totally has a normal life. And it just was this fascinating thing. Like, now I want to get to know my father. And, what I'd come to learn as I did more and more research was that Jeremy had been dying to meet his son for years after he was born, and wrote letters constantly and never got any answer back from that. And he just kind of gave up on it. And so when I finally told Jeremy that your son reached out to me and wants to meet you, he said, "But does he know all the things I've done?" And I said, "Yeah, he's listened. He knows." And then he said, "Well, I would love to talk to him." And that's kind of what started season 2. We just started going down that road, trying to maybe be a bridge between Jeremy and the son he'd never known.
Wow.
And I think about this a lot. It's almost, in some ways, it would be more comforting if Jeremy Scott were just a monster. You think about all the things he did, horrible things he did, the violence, sexual assault, rapes, murders. I mean, this is someone that you could very easily call a monster and wouldn't get a lot of criticism for saying that. But, you were able to see the humanity, even in someone who has done some of the most inhumane things imaginable. We see that a lot in our careers. You see people who've done horrific things that we're attempting to send away for the rest of their lives. And yet oftentimes that humanity will bleed through. How did that affect you, seeing that up close and personal?
Yeah, it was actually really disturbing to start, because I felt like, I don't know how close I want to get. I felt like I wanted to ask questions from a more journalistic point, get my story. But then story's over and he's still writing me. Like, what do I do here? Well, I am a human being. I can write him letters. At one point, and this is really strange, but it's part of the podcast, in the middle of the night, I got this, it was like midnight one night, I got an email from him in the prison and said, "Mr. King, I won't be writing to you anymore. This is the last time you'll ever hear from me. They're going to lock me away for a long time. The monster in me is coming out one more time. Goodbye and good luck." And I'm like, the hell is that? And so I didn't hear from him again for months. And I finally started filing record requests, and I found out that about an hour or 2 hours after he wrote me that note, he stabbed somebody in the prison. And I'm like, all right, I guess he's locked up. I didn't expect to ever hear from him again. I didn't know. And then a few months later, he wrote me a letter and said, "I'm in solitary confinement. They locked me up." And he went on to describe this incident that he had in another prison where he got blamed for being a snitch or something like that, with some drugs in the prison cell that he was in. And word got out in the prison and they had to transfer him immediately. And he describes this story about one of the guys in the new prison that he's at showed him a text and said, "There's a hit on you and it's coming." And he said, "I know the guy. I know he was going to do it." And he goes, "I just had to get him first." And he was it's a disturbing thing. He said, Mr. King, I could have stabbed him in the heart, but I didn't do that. Like he was kind of proud of the fact that he didn't kill this guy. He was just making a statement that he had to get this guy. And so we deal with the complications of getting a letter like that and, understanding like this is who you're dealing with. This is a man who should not be rehabilitated and not put out. And he understands that. But can he be redeemed in some way? Yeah, he can meet his son and he can try to regroup his life and be the best person he can be in a prison. But, when I start getting letters like that in the middle of the night, it was a disturbing thing to realize. I think the only reason I could really go forward with this story in a lot of ways was because of Leo. Leo was like the only one who was showing any like compassion and empathy for Jeremy. And he kind of gave me this permission. I even asked him about it. And he said, Gilbert, I'm proud of you for writing to him. He's part of my story. And, I don't want to see anybody hurt. I had to learn to forgive this guy, and it wasn't easy. I had to pray for years. And he said, that was really interesting way Leo put it. He said, I would pray to God and say that I forgive Jeremy Scott. He goes, but I was lying, and God knew I was lying. And I said, I'm going to just keep saying it until you make it true, God. And he basically said, I want you to not only forgive him, but I want you to show him love because he's never had love in his life before. And that will make things better for and when somebody like that is talking to you and telling you this, it's like something I've never experienced before. This kind of, it's like getting into Sister Helen Prejean territory in a weird way, but it was fascinating to deal with in the podcast and the interviews.
And you're right. I mean, you spend so much time on season 1, obviously spending a lot of time speaking with Leo, and we all come to get to know Leo in a way that we've never been able to because he's been behind bars. And of course, when you get to know someone, you tend to be on their quote unquote team. You're fighting for them. Anyone who's an enemy of theirs is going to be an enemy of yours. And that's why it was such a plot twist in season 1 when the monster who really killed Leo's wife confessed. You really were huge in facilitating that. No one would listen to him. You gave him paper to be able to write. And that was the only way he was able to start even putting it together, because obviously he's had a lot in his life, a lot of violence. It doesn't seem to be rehabilitatable. But from that perspective, you're right. We're all prepared to really hate Jeremy Scott. He was the reason that Leo had to be put through all of this. Yet for your season 2 to essentially do an about face and spend so much time with Jeremy, you don't learn how to do this in journalism school, right? I'm not a journalist, but I understand journalism, photography, these sorts of things. You're supposed to essentially observe and be an outsider and analyze what you see rather than be part of the story. So how do you yourself find that line? And clearly there's no right or wrong answer, but where do you decide each step of the way? How much are you observing? How much are you part of the story?
I mean, I'll just be honest. I didn't go to journalism school either. And I never really was a trained journalist. I went straight into books and it's narrative. And so I feel like I come at it from a different place, almost kind of closer to what you do, is you frame a story and you tell that story. And the way I look at it is like, it's still an ethical thing. Like you try to do an ethical thing when you're doing your job. I don't want to bring out something that's false or try to mislead or push a narrative and just not acknowledge that, oh yeah, this happened. But I'm not going to do that. That's not the evidence, that kind of thing. So it's just as long as I felt like with Jeremy, honestly, this sounds really strange, but I've never had someone talk to me as honestly as him for that many years consistently. I've been corresponding with him for 4 years now. He's never once denied killing Michelle. And when I started getting him in better moods, when he would start talking about reading and escaping, I felt like those were moments I could ask him about his past crimes and understand more of his past. And he was willing to share a lot with me. And one of the things I did was, we touch on this in season 1, the cab driver, which is a case I was kind of obsessed with, and it didn't get anywhere, and so I went back to Jeremy.
For people who may forget, tell us a little bit about the crime that involved the cab driver.
Sure. When we were going through depositions from the 80s, they had talked to Jeremy's girlfriend at the time. And the attorney said, has he ever confessed to any other crimes? And she said, well, there was a cab driver that he said he killed back in 87, but he said he got away with it. And I remember just like, I kind of believe that. I'm looking for this. And we went looking like crazy to try and find that, what it could be, unsolved cab killings. The reason it took a long time to find was that they actually charged someone and he got acquitted. And so it didn't really fit on my radar as like unsolved. So I didn't notice it at first. But when I started looking at that case, it was in a town that Jeremy used to live in at exactly that time. And So I said, we're going to go in and talk to him about this and interview him. And he just didn't even have to ask him. He brought it up. He just confessed right on the spot without us even asking. And he started saying, and he described stealing the cab, getting the cabbie and shooting the cab driver and then stealing the cab and crashing it and getting away. And so this was one time when he was in solitary confinement. I asked him, I said, I'm looking into that cab driver more. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that? And he wrote me this unbelievable 6-page letter. He said, Mr. King, I want you to know that I can be charged with first-degree murder for this, but that's okay. I'm going to tell you. And he wrote a 6-page, highly detailed letter. I mean, it was so detailed that I brought it into the state attorney's office and they reopened the case. I mean, it was just, he drew a map from memory describing everything, including naming the witnesses he saw because he was in that town who, turned out to be in the case. It was extremely specific. We're going to put the map, I think we have a map online, but I'll show it to you, but it's just remarkable. And so we just started talking to him more and more about that. And he was giving me more and more evidence about where he put the gun and everything he did. And everything was lining up with exactly what I was able to find. And that put me in a strange spot too now, because I'm the one who's putting this out there again, and he could be charged. And it started to hit me like, the worst thing for Jeremy is to get him moved from his solitary cell into, a holding cell back in the county, transported back there. Last time he did that in Polk County, when they brought him back for a Leo Schofield hearing, he got a little feisty with the judge on a camera deposition card, when they document your coming in, and some police just really beat him up, and he had black eyes. And so when the investigators got there, they interviewed him and they were like, so we didn't do anything to you. Where did you get those black eyes? He goes, no, you guys didn't do it. These were the cops in the cell back there. So I'm like, if he gets charged and they bring him back and he's in this hostile situation, they take him off his meds, they put him in a psych cell. I feel a little bit of guilt for that. And I'm trying to struggle with that a little bit still, because I do feel for him. But on the other hand, he's done what he's done. Knows that he's confessing to me and that I'm not keeping this secret. He knows all that. So it's just a weird thing to have on your conscience, but I'll get through it. But
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way.
Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
this brings up a question I had. So hopefully I'm not asking you to basically just repeat what you just said, but season 1 is, it's Leo's story, right? And season 2, I haven't listened to it yet. I'm really looking forward to it, but it seems like it's Jeremy's story. And in season 1, you have a very strong motivation, whether it was your motivation in the beginning or whether it was one that developed over time. I think it was, at least once you started recording. And the motivation is, we have this innocent man. We want to get him out of prison. We want to clear his name. It's a very clear motivation, something you can fully get behind. Season 2, what would you, it's murkier, right? I mean, it's difficult for all the reasons you just said. What would you say is the motivation? What are you trying to accomplish by the time the last episode rolls?
Well, that's a great question, because that's what we were struggling with for the longest time. Like, why are we telling this story? And I think one of the things that really became interesting was I was talking to a prosecutor down in Florida, and she was asking about Leo's case and, where it goes from here. He's out on parole. And, we're like, the possibilities of exoneration, they're not easy, especially, when you're out on parole and you don't have a legal case anymore. How do you get an exoneration, right? That's what Leo wants, but they're difficult. And the prosecutor told me, she goes, the only real chance you have is just making it crystal clear that Jeremy was credible all along. And if you can prove that, and if you can bring that to public, it may not be evidence that rises in the court, but it can still affect the case. And I thought, well, that's really interesting to explore, because I have a relationship with this guy and he's telling me everything. What can I figure out? One of the other things that happened in this season was Jeremy's girlfriend from the time wouldn't talk to me. I tried several times. We got really close. I was in a restaurant waiting for her to show up, and she just didn't show up. She just said I had second thoughts. I didn't want to put myself through it. But because her son reached out to her, this interesting dynamic enveloped in season 2. She never wanted to tell her own son about Jeremy. She just didn't want to bring it up. She wanted to avoid the whole subject. But, and you can imagine this, and she says this to us. She says, growing up, he looks exactly like Jeremy. Same eyes, same voice, same way of walking, same gait. And she goes, it was disturbing. And she goes, I was thinking, like, is this, from his DNA? Is this like Damien, the child? Like, who is this kid going to be? And it was terrifying to her. And so she never brought it up, never talked to him about it. But when she found out that Justin and I were talking about this, she agreed to talk, but because I still can't say it to my son's face. But I listened to your podcast, I can tell it to you. And so she started telling us the whole story of how she met Jeremy and how she went through everything and was there for all the crimes that he committed, excluding the last one that he got locked up for. And she was there that day, and she was pregnant with Justin. And so she tells us that story, and it's like relating it back to Justin and Justin learning all of this. It's just fascinating the way it develops. You see other people start to come into the picture. It turns out one of Leo's fellow pastors from theological school in prison gets transferred after Leo gets released. He gets transferred up to the same prison Jeremy's at, and he becomes a caretaker for Jeremy in the solitary. And like Jeremy tells me, I was like, I can't believe this guy wants to talk to me. He's one of Leo's friends. And then he goes, Mr. King, he shook my hand and he was kind to me. And they started having this relationship, talking about the case. And he said, Jeremy told me right away that, everything was true, that he killed Michelle. And then this guy, Oscar, starts treating him kindly and helping him through some of his really rough spots. And it's just this really human story that develops. It's really kind of impossible to imagine that, but it's the access to a man who's killed multiple people, and he's completely remorseful and he's being completely honest. And it's just this access to him and listening to this. And as it moves backwards towards Leo and builds up to this thing with Leo that I think is just going to be so fascinating for people to hear.
I can't wait to listen. And, like you said, having this incredible access to someone who hasn't denied all these things he's done. And somehow, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. In a lot of ways, he did get away with murder and a lot of things for a long time. Really, he would have continued to get away with it just because no one was looking for him at the time. I mean, is this a situation where, he calls you and he recognizes before he stabs another man that there's a monster in him and he's coming out? Prosecutors would look at that and say premeditation. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's a monster. He still chooses to do it. It is not out of rage. Now, you've explained the backstory of what was happening with the dynamics within the prison. Would his life have been different? Could he be rehabilitated if he were caught right after the first murder, maybe even after the second one, as opposed to just decades upon decades where he's allowed to continue to feed this monster and nobody stopped him. I mean, this is the age-old question, but you've had just this incredible access into the mind of someone who a lot of the ways the justice system failed him as well as the victims. Like, what if someone stopped him and he wasn't then another killer and another killer?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the interesting thing because his first arrest for murder was at the age of 15. So he's pretty young. And I mean, I looked at the case a million ways till Sunday. Like, there's no doubt this guy, he left his fingerprints at the scene. The same thing. He was confessing to the people around him. Like, he did it. He just got acquitted on this one. And the reason he got acquitted, which is just unbelievable to me, he testified on his own behalf. And, you know, he had like a 70 something IQ. He could barely speak. Instead of saying like, I don't recall, he would say, I don't require. Like, he just didn't come across like, anyway, yeah. But at the end of it, there was a rifle that was used to kill this older woman, Granny, they called her. And the jury basically said, we didn't think he was smart enough to wipe his fingerprints off the gun. And like, yeah, there's all these other things he talks about wiping fingerprints. Like, it's definitely his MO is wiping his fingerprints.
He did it in every case.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Including the one he actually got convicted for.
Yes. And so it's just like, it's so strange.
Also, it's a very basic cover up.
Right.
Yeah. But I think if he would have gotten convicted for that, he would have, well, they were going to try and send him to death, but I think that would have been reversed at some point. He would have been back on life in prison. But, you know, it was before the time where they changed the parole thing. I don't think he would have gotten paroled on that because he would have created more violence in the prison. I think he would have just been a lifer. But I just don't think somebody like this would be able to be rehabilitated. I think the damage to him was done so early in life with brain damage and the drugs and abuse that he was suffering that I don't think he would have been. In fact, the psychiatrist that evaluated him at age 15 said the same thing, that he just needs to be incarcerated, that there's no hope for him. It's pretty horrible.
And, you know, it's even if he was not if he couldn't have been rehabilitated, I always go back to Michelle's murder. And a lot of times in true crime, we talk about these cases, innocence cases, and people have sort of very complex theories about how someone was framed. It was the police and prosecutors all working together, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of times what it really is just incompetence or failure to follow up or failure to do just the basics. And in this case if they had just taken those fingerprints off of that car and compared them to known suspects in the area, they would have matched him. And there's no way he wouldn't have been charged with this crime. And he would have been convicted.
Yeah. And if you think about it, would you have a good case against Jeremy Scott knowing his history and that there's fingerprints left in this area? And like, as Leo said, doesn't that rise to reasonable doubt for me?
Yes.
I was like, yeah, I didn't think about that. But yeah. And, you know, the interesting thing is the detective who investigated Jeremy for the killing with the granny lady, he was also Leo's investigator. So he knew that Jeremy had gotten away with it. I talked to him and, he was pretty convinced that, he had the right guy. He had no doubts about that. So why didn't it think, it's in that same neighborhood. Why didn't he think to look at this,
It doesn't make any sense because you'd think he'd be looking. It's funny because he should be looking to pin something on Jeremy to get him for the murder, right?
I didn't think about that, but that's true. Like, he should have been the number one suspect, the guy that got away from me.
Yeah, it's just wild. I don't know.
It is, yeah. But there's a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, another thing that just always bugged me is like the pack of Marlboro, like right near the bloodstains. It's like this big pack of Marlboro just sitting right near the bloodstains. And it's the only thing that the police photographed but didn't collect as evidence and didn't run prints on. I just find that just absolutely shocking because on all the other cases, Jeremy, when they're collecting the scene, they always find Marlboros there. And he admits that was his brand. Granted, it's popular, but it's also at the other places he killed people. It's staggering to me.
So we've talked a lot about Jeremy, but obviously Leo is the focus of the first season. How much do you get to continue Leo's story in the second season?
He's a presence throughout because, I have conversations with Jeremy and, sometimes it'll drift back to Michelle. Sometimes it'll drift back to cab driver. And he just constantly talking about the things he did. So that's always in there. But especially when you get towards the end of the podcast, there's a really interesting moment. And I'll give you the background of it. I don't think it's going to spoil anything because you're just going to want to hear it. At one point, I was talking to Jeremy. And if you remember from season 1, there's a moment where the state believes that he recanted his confession on the stand. And there's a female prosecutor that shows him an autopsy picture. And she kind of shields it from the gallery, but says, look at this. And he does, I've seen it before. And he kind of turns his head. And she says, look at it again. And she's showing him an autopsy picture. And she goes, did you do that to her? Is this what you did to her? He says, no, I didn't do that. And that got written up in the argument, the closing argument, as a recantation, and the judge agreed and said that he recanted on the stand. I never believed he recanted, because in redirect, he just went right back to the same story, but it got framed a certain way and it got ruled a certain way and it was over. And so I asked Jeremy to revisit that on the phone, and I taped it. I was taping everything. And I said, Jeremy, can you just go back to that evidentiary hearing? And he was like, he was mad. He says, they made it look like I raped her. They showed me a naked body that was stabbed up. And he says, they know damn well she had all her clothes on when I left her there. And I'm like, yeah, all right. He just thought that that's what she was implying by showing that he'd left her like that, not that they were showing an autopsy picture. And he's thinking, that doesn't match my reality. My reality is I left her with clothes on. And so he thought she was implying that there was a rape. And afterwards, he goes on to talk about it. He goes, I may be a messed up person, but I'm not that messed up. And he goes, and then he just kind of quietly, casually says, like, Mr. King, I can't blame it on the drugs and the alcohol. There's no excuse for what I did. Like, it's just so plain spoken, and just, it's just a casual admission to what he did. And you can hear him struggling with this. And so this was like in January, after Leo had that motorcycle accident. I'll just tell you, Leo was traveling on a motorcycle with his daughter, and a car pulled out in front of him and they crashed into it. Horrible, horrible high-speed crash. Leo suffered a broken pelvis, broken leg, ankles, wrists, hands, torn bladder. I mean, just serious thing. Fortunately, no head injuries. Ashley, the same. His daughter, Ashley, same kind of injuries, just not quite as severe. No head injuries, thankfully. So he's been confined to a hospital bed for the last 3 months. And so I went down to visit him, and I just said, you know what? I always keep him up to date. I just want to play you this tape from Jeremy. I know it's always kind of triggering for him to hear these moments from, like, Michelle's last moments that he hasn't heard before or something like that. And it's really difficult for him to hear this stuff, but he always says, tell me everything. And so I was there to play him the tape, and out of nowhere, Jeremy calls me right while I was at Leo's bed. And I was like, oh man, it says like Rayford, like, or whatever prison he was at the time. I said, it's Jeremy. I don't know should I pick it up? And he said, yeah, pick it up. And so I pick it up. I said, Jeremy, listen, I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm standing here with Leo right now. And he said he wants to talk to you. Do you want to talk to him? And he just goes, yeah. And he was standing at a kiosk, so you could hear other people around him. And they just start making this really awkward small talk to begin with. And then Leo just gets right to the point. And it's just so powerful. It's just Leo being Leo. He goes, I just want you to know I forgive you. And I've had to go through years of prayer to get to this point, but I forgive you. And I thank you for doing the right thing. I believe, that you've told the truth about this. And I thank you because I think it changed my life and you played a part in that. And, I just want you to be able to know that I forgive you, and you don't, and Leo's very complicated about it. He's like, I can forgive him for my own good, but I can't forgive him for Michelle's family. I can't speak for them, but I can speak for myself. And this was the way I survived in prison, getting past this. And then just hearing Jeremy's response to it is just, it's emotional. Like all the remorse that the state was sort of expecting for Leo to, in the parole hearings, it all comes from Jeremy. He's just, I thank you, bro. He gets emotional and, he apologizes to Leo for what he did. And, they have this moment between them, and then it just kind of drifts away and they start talking, and you can see Leo being Leo, kind of mentoring him through, like, you're in a step down program now. You got to get out of that. You got to do better, and you can get to a better place, and this will be a better place for you, but you got to commit to being. And he goes, I need you to pray for me, Leo. And Leo's like, I'm still praying for you, Jerry. And it's just so heartbreaking to hear it. Like these two guys have come together and sort of settled on the truth between them. It's not a truth that the state believes, but these two men believe it themselves. It almost feels more powerful in a lot of ways, that the law can't touch this ground all the time.
Wow, you're absolutely right, especially when it comes to, violent crimes like murders. The law it can only get so close to justice, but even if the right person is convicted, there's no justice at the end of the day. And the story that you sought out to tell, this goes well beyond true crime. It goes well beyond wrongful convictions. It goes well beyond rightful convictions. This is a story of redemption, even when there is no seemingly no hope. And that's redemption coming from Leo here for Jeremy. And I think it's going to have wide-ranging repercussions beyond just Leo and Jeremy. And I think it was incredible that you were able to facilitate that.
Yeah, it's really strange because it was like, you'd almost see like if you were designing a podcast, you'd say, let's get them together somehow. Like Leo's out and we'll just put them in a room. And Leo, how do you feel going into this? And Jeremy, what do you think? And it's like you could see that moment developing on television or something like that. And this was totally spontaneous. This was just a phone call that came and like they're talking over each other. And, towards the end, it's just, I think Jeremy had so much relief that Leo is being so giving towards him that they kind of started joking around. And it was a strange thing to hear. Like, Leo told him about the accident and, how hard it was. And he says, you gotta start out small, maybe on a tricycle on a side road, just start out that way. And Leo got a laugh out of it. And it was just so weird to hear them speaking this way, but it definitely reflected the tone of Leo being the pastor and caring for someone who was really downtrodden and broken and trying to lift him in some way. And it's just who Leo is. But it was just fascinating to hear. And I don't know. I hope what you said is true, Alice. I don't really know. We just knew we had something so powerful, but it wasn't fitting like normal things that we'd listened to before. And like there is true crime in it, but there's also this redemption element. And I don't, like restorative justice in a way, with no like, real structure to it. It just happened.
And look, I think Alice put her finger on it, and I think you have too. This podcast is different because how often do you actually get to that kind of redemption? I mean, usually even podcasts that are popular, even podcasts that are really good, even podcasts that tell really good stories and unravel really good mysteries, they're still very surface level in a lot of ways. And I thought the Bone Valley, the first season, you start off and it's really good, but it's also a really good true crime podcast about this case and this mystery and whether or not this guy did it. Yeah. But as the first season went, by the end, it has a spiritual aspect. That last episode where you attend the church service at the jail, at the prison, was just so moving. And to see it now go into this second season and that really become the thing. We asked earlier, what was the purpose? You just put your finger on it. If Jeremy Scott can change and be redeemed or have the shot at redemption, I mean, that's a message to all of us that we can too. And I don't know. I feel like this is going to be a really powerful thing. And I am looking forward to hearing it.
Yeah, I'm glad you hear that. And it's also, there's this thing about the son aspect, which went in a different direction too. Like he's got this compassion. He just turns to be like, at one point, Jamie, the girlfriend, was talking to us and, she said, this is really hard to say, but like she explains to the difficulties in her own life. She goes, the one thing I did right in life was the son I had with Jeremy. Like he's this beautiful person that developed. He grew up hearing like, you're not your father when anything went wrong. You're not your father. You're a good person. And it got in his head so much. Like, who is my father? You keep talking about, I don't know anything about him, but keep saying I'm not my father. And, we were talking to Jamie about it and she said, you have to understand this. Like Jeremy did have a good side. Like I fell for part of him. He was a caring person. He had that good side. Otherwise I wouldn't have gotten with him. Obviously she knows about his bad side, but she said, my son, Justin, has that good side. That's the good side that I see in him, but it's always there. Like, Justin never gets in any trouble. He's just really a beautiful human being, a family person. And the concept of family starts to become really apparent. Jeremy was just given up by his mother at birth, didn't want anything to do with him, and grew up thinking his grandmother was his mother, even while his mother was in the scene. They just kept that from him, and the betrayal and all that. And then just to see like Justin is this very family oriented guy and very concerned about that. And he's writing to Jeremy and talking about his family, and you hear Jeremy talking about all his regrets. It's just, there's a lot of moments like that. Sometimes they're just conversations I was having with Jeremy that are just really mundane. He's like, Mr. King, I got this lump on my stomach and I'm losing a lot of weight. I think I weigh 140 pounds now. And I'm like, where is it on your stomach, Jeremy? I'm like, I'm freaking diagnosing this guy in prison. And like, what is this about? But you can't stop listening to it, hearing his pain. And like, I can't go to the doctor because it costs $5. And like, what do you do? Like, get to a doctor. And it's really frustrating to hear some of the stories. But like, on the other hand, there's this humanity that comes through, and I've decided I'm going to embrace it and just, and just see where it goes and take my cues from Leo. That was always my mission on this, is just Leo's going to tell you how to behave.
And I don't know if I'm mischaracterizing where the season 2 is going, but one thing that I think is really beautiful about this is, I had a law school professor who taught a death penalty class who started out the class with, "You are not the worst action you've ever taken." And I know we've heard that before, but oftentimes in these types of podcasts, when you are covering someone who's just indisputably done horrific things, usually the call to action is, well, let him out anyways because the system failed him, etc. I don't hear that from you because I don't think even Jeremy thinks that's the right thing for him. He doesn't want to be a killer, and he recognizes if he's let out, this can happen again, and we can't have that happen. But what I love about this is in season 1, there was a clear call to action because we had a clear story for Leo, to get justice for Leo and to get him out of prison, first of all, clear his name at the end of the day. So there were calls to action, but it reaches something different in season 2, where I don't think your call to action is, well, now you get to know Jeremy, let's let him out, because I don't think that's the right thing and the best thing even for Jeremy, but rather what you are touching upon. Humans are incredibly complex. We are all in this true crime space seeking to understand something greater than ourselves. And the Jeremys and Jeremy's sons and the people who are affected by his really horrific crimes are all part of the story that often get lost. And it is helpful to understand how he got where he is, and even recognizing that by getting to know the complexity of someone doesn't necessarily always just mean open the doors. That's not justice. That's not mercy for him or anyone else. And that is a complex emotion to hold. And that's why I really love your storytelling, because you are incredibly honest about what it means to get to know Jeremy, but recognizing that there may not be a call to action in the ways that the true crime world is typically seeking. They want to sign a petition. They want to ask the governor to do something. And that's why I think your story is going to reach something much, much higher. We've not all murdered someone, but we are all broken people. So I thank you for leaning into a story that doesn't fit the mold of really anything we've seen.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned there, what is the best that you can hope for in a situation like this? I mean, I think the police would tell you the same thing. This guy's never getting out of prison. He doesn't belong out of prison. What can he do for himself and for the people he's hurt? And we talk about all the victims, the ripples of violence. I mean, a lot of the show is about, the murders that he got away with, and they created new victims. I go and visit the taxi cab driver's widow. She didn't know, I never knew who he was. I didn't know anything about the taxi cab driver. I went up and finally met her and talked to her and see what developed from that. So there's all these ripples of pain from the things Jeremy did. What's the best thing that could possibly happen, not just for Jeremy's soul, but for society, is that he comes clean and he's honest about the things he does, and he gives this sense of truth to everybody out there. This cab driver's widow, she was upset because she said the state kind of lied to her. And I was telling her the things that had happened in the case, and she's like, that's not what they told me. And, she had to learn all this, and she kind of like, I was living with this false thing that was presented to me. And so she had anger and bitterness about that. And I showed her all the evidence and everything. And just like that was the best you could hope for. And Jeremy makes it clear. He goes like, I'm not getting out. I can't do anything to bring Michelle back, but maybe I can make it better for her family if they know what really happened. And maybe it will help Leo, because, at the end of the episode, after we talked to Leo, I said, how did that make you feel? Like he called me later. I said, how did Leo's words make you feel better? And he goes, I got to be honest, I got real emotional listening to him, but to hear him be free and to be out of prison, he goes, I just, I ruined his life. I took his life from him, and just to hear him be free just made such a difference to me, and I feel so much better. And I was like, God, all right, that's about as honest as you get. And Brett, you'll appreciate this. There was like a little bit of a jinx moment at the end, because like I didn't know how to turn off the recorder after the phone call, and we're just like, nothing I say is anything interesting, but Leo's just like, doesn't get more real than that. He goes, I've been praying for the moment to actually be able to say this, but he goes, today was a test. I didn't know if I could actually do it. And we caught that on tape. It's just like, it's so real.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Speaking of Leo, you were in the hospital with him when this happened. He was in that wreck. How is he doing?
He's getting better. He just had 2 days ago, he had total wrist replacement. His hand is really bad. One of the hands is a little bit better. As a guitar player, like he thinks, like, I got to play guitar. Like, that's my thing. And he came out of the first surgeries to just repair it with plates and screws. And they're like, his arm was just bent at a weird angle. And they finally said, you need a wrist replacement. There's no guarantee that, he's ever going to play guitar again. That's pretty bad. The other thing is he doesn't really have total feeling of his right leg yet. So he's not able to walk. There's clearly some nerve damage, but they're not able to determine if it's permanent or if it's just temporary. They said it could take a year to find out. So he's really restless because his mind is just still, he recalls everything. But he's really confined to a bed for about 23 hours a day or a little less than that. He's starting to get out in a van and go to church services and talk. And, he thinks he's got an arrangement where he's going to start preaching from a wheelchair for a little while. But he's spiritually, he's doing better. Physically, he's got a lot of rehabilitation ahead of him. And same with Ashley, who's a little bit more advanced. She's up and walking around a little bit.
Is the GoFundMe still active?
Yeah, the GoFundMe is still there. Yeah, same link if you want to track it down.
Okay. We'll put that link in the show notes if you're listening and want to support that.
Oh, that'll be very appreciative. The one thing that's interesting is that he was in a halfway house when he got in the accident. But because he's like sort of, his behavior is impeccable and he does everything, they just said, all right, enough, we'll just take you out of there. And so his wife moved up to the Tampa area and they're renting a house. And so now that's where he's staying. He's kind of in the living room in a hospital bed. And he's got the 3 grandchildren running around every time I call him. It's like, Leo, are you okay in there? That's a lot. I hope you're not like all the babysitting duties are on you.
Well, I hope he knows that despite being confined to a bed or a chair for most of the hours in a day, especially with the conversation that you just kind of recounted to us, when season 2 comes out, I truly think his voice and his actions and his forgiveness is going to reach the ends of the earth in a way that he physically can't do right now. So if that can give him any solace, I mean, that's incredible that he's going to be able to do that through your podcast.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I remember when I first saw him, I said, you're really a tested individual. You are really being tested. And he just kind of shook his head and he goes, yeah, but if there's one person who can get through this, it's me. I can believe that too. It's just the way he thinks.
Absolutely.
Gilbert, I got to say, you're the king of all media. I've been reading Devil in the Grove. It's an excellent book.
So good.
Yeah, I sometimes think I got to go back to history because sometimes I get so involved in these people's lives that I'm just like, maybe I should be just dealing with documents.
Clearly you're being called to it and you have a gift for it. Let's just say we reach out to people all the time to talk to us. Nobody talks to us.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you one other quick story. I don't know how much time we have, but talking about people coming out of the woodwork, right? So like the cab driver case, I could never get the sheriff's office. Nobody would talk to me. And then out of the blue, I get a message from the lead detective on the case who, we basically say like, you framed this guy. And he goes, if you want to talk, I'm a big fan of your books.
Wow.
And so like all of a sudden we're like interviewing him and taking us through the scene of the cabbie crime scene. And he's describing it all. And I'm like, I finally like show him all the evidence Jeremy gave. And I said, come on, like you don't believe he's a suspect? And he goes, no, he's a suspect. I admit it. He should be a suspect. So like, it's the strangest things happen out there. It's Florida, man. It's Florida.
Well, it's time for good podcasting and good books, right?
Yes, it's prime grounds. You don't have to go far.
In addition to subscribing and listening to Bone Valley 2, wherever people get podcasts when it comes out on April 9th, are there any other projects that you're doing that we can support or any other way we can help get the word out about season 2 and Leo?
No, you're doing exactly. You have a huge following. A lot of people that contact me, say heard about the podcast from the prosecutors. So you're reaching a lot of people, and I think just with the nice, lovely, honest conversations we have that are so intellectually stimulating to me are just so helpful, because I think people that hear it, they go, "Oh, I got to hear this." And I promise you, we didn't spoil anything. You can know it's coming, but you just got to hear it. The whole episode is just really. I'm really proud of it. It was a hard season to come together and find a theme that really worked and didn't feel like, are we like doing like just trauma for trauma's sake? Like we're going in these dark areas, and then just kind of beautiful thing emerged from it. And I think it's just sort of like I'm a big fan of Bryan Stevenson, author of Just Mercy. And he says something about, in order to really understand injustice, you got to be proximate. You got to be on the ground and talk to the people who are affected by this injustice. And that includes everybody, the victims, the perpetrators, just trying to understand what happened and be willing to listen. I think it draws you in. And I think that's the reason we were able to get really close in this case, was just building up this trust and empathy and not feeling that they were going to be exploited, giving them an opportunity to be heard. And that's what got people talking to us. And so I just, it came together in a strange way, but in a really beautiful way. And I think sometimes it just has to happen that way. You got to sort of hope for a miracle to happen. And then it kind of does, because you did the groundwork. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we need more voices like yours out there. And I truly mean that. In no way was season 1, it felt truly like your heart was invested. And I know it was, just as I'm sure season 2, your heart is invested as well. Thank you for bringing so much of yourself to these projects. I know these are years, if not longer, in the making, and they take a lot out of you, but thank you for sharing it with us. And basically anything you write, anything you podcast, we're going to listen to and read. So please keep producing, because we want your voice out there.
I'm going to take a little vacation, but then I'll get back to something.
Maybe don't go to Florida.
Yeah, I got to avoid Florida. It's where they all come. Somebody give me a business card. Here we go. 6 more years now.
That's right. Those of you who have not listened to season 1 came about because he literally got a business card from a judge who said, "You've got to cover Leo Schofield's case." It's incredible. I'm not ruining anything. The rest is history. It's another podcast. Well,
that's funny.
Gilbert, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and for, introducing season 2 of Bone Valley to us. You guys have got to listen to it. April 9th is just around the corner. Actually, it might be right about the time this comes out for the rest of you. Gilbert, let us know anything you have coming out. Just let us know. We're going to pump it up.
I'll stay in touch with you guys. I'll always be listening, so I feel like I always hear you anyway, but I'll reach out if something comes up. But I thank you for having me on. I really mean it. It's really a pleasure to talk to you guys.
And tell Leo we're praying for him.
I definitely will. He's a big fan of you guys. Trust me.
Thank you.
Very appreciative.
Well, you guys, we love Gilbert King. You are going to want to listen to season 2, Bone Valley, April 9th. Get it wherever you listen to podcasts. We also have in the show notes, of course, the GoFundMe to support Leo and his daughter, Ashley, who were in a really bad motorcycle accident, and they are recovering, and you will hear his voice on Bone Valley 2. He is still doing incredible things despite his injuries. But let us know what you think. If you want us to direct you to Gilbert or anywhere else, email us at prosecutorspod@gmail.com. And we are just so honored to have you, Gilbert. Well, until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And I'm Gilbert.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs.
Okay. Yeah. So we're gonna talk around it.
Yeah,
at the end, I'll be like, we have just been, we've gone so long.
I got you.
We're just gonna have to. We're gonna have to really get into the case tomorrow.
Okay. No. I love it. I love it. Okay. So, but we're still gonna sign in.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. I got you. Okay.
Are you ready?
In the game. I'm ready.
Okay. All right.
Really good. Especially because it's an hour, they're not going to know. They're going to be so angry.
You know what's fun?
Stream all the movies and shows you love for free on Pluto TV.
Say what now? Showtime.
That means drama is free with heart-wrenching stories from Love and Basketball, Power, and Greenleaf.
In this family, we live by the Spirit.
And laughter is free with gut-busting comedies like Key and Peele, The Neighborhood, Everybody Hates Chris, and Boomerang. Watch all the hits, all for free, from all your favorite devices.
Oh my God, I love it!
Feel the free Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.
Find yourself looking for a new job or change in career? Monster.com is here to help. We are not only here to bring you job postings, but also AI interview prep and salary tools, expert career advice, and top-notch resume services. We've got everything you need to land your perfect job fit. Discover the magic of finding the ideal job with Monster.com. Your future starts now. Visit Monster.com today. Your next job opportunity is just a click away.